Today, I want to speak on solitude in service to anything but solitude. Now, solitude is a profoundly important practice in anybody's life for peace, growth, tranquility, happiness, reflection, understanding. All of these things are paramount for the good life, and they all rest on our ability to engage in solitude. But solitude becomes corrupted when our solitude is never in service to solitude. It's in service to, productivity. We're engaging in solitude so we can come back to work stronger, better, or we're engaging in solitude so that we can have, a profound insight, or that we can, we're seeking something from our solitude. And this destroys and corrupts the solitude. And you gain no fruit from a solitude of this nature. Now, often this only comes about from a hectic existence, when you never give yourself time for solitude until it's too late. And then you rush into solitude. And in doing that, you rush your solitude. And that takes the whole idea and the whole premise away from it, because you're no longer just doing it to, see where it takes you, not worrying about the time, not worrying about anything, just enjoying the present. You're now worried about how much time you've potentially wasted, what you've been doing, why you didn't do this earlier, and then hoping something really profound comes to make up for all the other times you've been neglecting it. And we destroy our solitude when we do this, and then we get bitter towards our solitude, and we think, this is no longer serving me, this is no longer helping me. And then we fall into a dangerous trap of just consuming external noise constantly, whether it's, the first thing we do when we get in the car, putting on music, or listening to podcasts instead of engaging in discourse with ourselves, you know, instead of going for long walks, just watching a movie. These are, we need to actively, in this day and age, make time for solitude and go out of our way to engage in it, because if we don't, we're naturally gonna steer towards those, you know, easier activities. It's easier to listen to music on a 30-minute car ride than to just, you know, roll your window down a little bit and listen to the air and listen to the noises of the world, and, observe the changing of the leaves. And, it's a lot easier to just put on some music or throw on a podcast and then just zone out for 30 minutes. And even if it's, a good podcast, and even if it's good music, and even if it's informational and you're learning, there is a time and a place for this, of course. But I think we need to be weary when we're so quick to do this. We're just so quick to get out of solitude. We're so quick to get out of silence. And I think in this day and age, there's just too much information coming in. And if the only information you consume, say you don't read, for whatever reason, and all your information comes from podcasts, then it could be good for you to listen to podcasts, but on a car ride. But you need a time for solitude to actually think about and go over what you just heard. But so often, at least for me, I'll read for a good chunk of time, and then I'll get into a car, put on music, go to the gym, put on music, put on a podcast, and then not even think about the things I just read, not even think about all the profound thoughts I just had. And then they don't completely leave, but some do. And you don't dig as deep into the ones that you could have dug as deep into. And then life happens, things come up, and then you find yourself not having a moment of solitude until, the next day. And then the deep, profound insights you could have had from your bout of reading is just now gone, or your podcast, it's now gone, because you gave yourself no time for reflection, no time for solitude. And you just had information overload. And this idea that, solitude needs to be in service to itself, I think is very powerful, because our solitude is our solitude is the thing that helps our growth the most. It helps us reflect the most. It helps us engage with ourselves the most. It helps us understand what we want the most, what we truly want, not what other people want, not what our hedonistic whims want. It helps us figure out what we truly deep down want. And when solitude is just in service to the motions, just doing it because you think you should, or because you've always done it, or, you know, whatever may be the case, when it's done without giving it the amount of time it truly needs, no matter how long that is, you're doing a disservice to it. And as I said, that's just the meaning of life somehow feels violated when we do not engage in self-reflection and internal, you know, guidance or internal discourse. But that's mainly the main point. Just give ourselves time for solitude, engage in it deeply, don't rush it, make sure it's in service to itself, and realize that your growth is inhibited if you don't. And you're just so much more at peace when you just give yourself time to just be alone with your thoughts, when you don't drown out every second with an external noise, with something trivial. And then your real life experience is far more richer because you've engaged in solitude for, however long. And then when you interact with people, you're more you're more open to interaction. You've spent enough time with yourself, you've thought about the things, you've gone over the things, you've reflected, you've enjoyed peace, you've let your mind roam, and now you see somebody, and you're more amped to want to have a conversation, to want to talk to them, to want to get to know them, to be more friendly, to not be short, because you have nothing to go. You have nowhere to go. You have nothing to get to. You've already done your deep work. You've already had introspection. You've already reflected, and now you can let back and have a good conversation. And then after that, you can give back into solitude and you can reflect on the conversation. But when we don't give ourselves time to reflect on these things via solitude, they just build up, and it's just we have a inbox with just 100 messages, and we just feel overwhelmed. We don't know why we feel overwhelmed, but we just feel overwhelmed because we have so much inside of us that hasn't been opened. And then through a and then when we finally start engaging in solitude, when we start opening those things, we start rushing through it. It gets overwhelming, and it doesn't feel fruitful, and it doesn't feel good, and it's just solitude in service to anything but, and it sucks. So we need to constantly make sure the inbox is at zero. We're empty. The Bible talks about being empty, and it's best to be empty because it's easier to fill yourself up anew when you are empty. And I think we constantly have to search to be empty. We constantly have to try to have no baggage, to have nothing in the inbox, to let what happens happen and then reflect on it, and then let what happens and then reflect on it. And then understand that the solitude is where we realize if we're going astray, if we're following our right path, and where we need to change, if we need to change, what we need to do, why we need to do it. If you don't engage in solitude, you never have these realizations. And you just wander through life, pleasure to pleasure, never really engaging with yourself, never really understanding deeply that which you truly want. And that sucks. It's hard. And it's always harder to start. the solitude journey when you've gotten out of it. So it's best, obviously, not to get out of it, to continue the habit. But there is something valuable about, blowing up your habits and, blowing up your routines and blowing up everything you value. Because every once in a while, you got to make sure it's still worth valuing. You got to make sure it's still helping you. Sometimes we hold on to beliefs and we hold on to things that we do after 5 years of doing it, and we don't realize that it's no longer serving us, that is no longer helping us get to where we want to go. At a certain place in time, it was helping us and it was paramount, but now it is no longer helping us and it's actually inhibiting us. And without solitude, we can't figure that out. And without blowing up the whole scheme, we can't truly know for certain either. And then, sometimes you'll blow it up and, maybe after a week, maybe after a few months, maybe after a year, you realize, wow, I really have to do that. Like there was a reason that I did that. Like it helps me immensely when I'm not doing that. Or when I am doing that, it helps me immensely. And when I'm not, it hurts me. And then you can have a more strong founded belief instead of, you can say, all right, I can reconfirm this, you know, a few months ago instead of this got confirmed 10 years ago. I don't know if it's no, I don't know if it's still serving me, but I don't like change and I don't want to risk it. So, I'm just going to go with it. We don't want to do that. And it can suck when we're blowing up our life because, it's hard. It's hard to change, and it's hard to view things objectively at times. Sometimes it's hard to really calculate work, or it's really hard to calculate true productivity because just checking box off is not the work of life. It is not true productivity. Sometimes you'll go through a day and you won't have checked any boxes off, but it would have been a profoundly productive day in service to your life and in service to being. And then other days you'll check every box off and you'll you'll you won't feel good. You'll feel like you wasted the day. You'll feel like you didn't spend your time wisely. And just checking boxes off to check boxes off is a waste of time. And we need to really be sure that we're doing that for a good reason. And sometimes you can only be sure if you stop doing it. And then maybe you can give up the habit, or maybe you just have more reason to keep it. Deeper founded beliefs. And this, if you just remember one thing of this video, I think it's really just to understand how powerful solitude is and how essential in this day and age it is to allow ourselves to become bored, to allow ourselves not to pick up our phone, even though we haven't really done anything in an hour, to go to the gym and to, you know, put headphones in, but listen to, like nature sounds, classical music or white noise, something that is not something that allows solitude and thoughts to just come and to just you to be able to engage with them. And same with car rides. And then in those moments when you're working, you have so much solitude to go off of. In those moments when you're stressed, you have so much energy to deal with it because you're not letting your energy leak away trying to deal with problems that you haven't dealt with. We need to allow ourselves to give into solitude, and everyone has a different schedule, and you need to realize how it works in yours. If your day is full of noise, maybe you have to get up early. If your car rides are long, maybe, and that's all the only time you have alone, maybe it's no music. It's just silence and you just enjoy that solitude. But we need to really take advantage of those moments where we could potentially have solitude because sometimes they're few and far between, and when they are, we wish we engaged. And solitude is, I think we're fully alive in solitude. We are deeply living in solitude, and I think that's what Henry David Thoreau thought when he was in Walden. You know, he went there to live deeply, to make sure he sucked all the marrow out of life. And I think he would say he did when he was there. And he was just in solitude.